It looked like I was tickling his chin. Hi, I'm Meredith, and welcome to my channel. So if you didn't know, I was a finalist at the Her Universe fashion show this year. The designer has to be the one to make the outfit, or at least the important parts of the outfit. So what you can see right here, besides the hat, was made by me. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how I made it. So the fashion show this year was sponsored by Universal, which meant that the designers had to design a piece that was inspired by Universal intellectual property. So that would include DreamWorks or like the Universal monsters like Frankenstein, Dracula. So my design that got selected was inspired by Wicked, and I mainly chose my inspiration from the Wizard's throne room. So when Elphaba and Galinda first go see Jeff Goldblum as the wizard, they enter through these huge gold doors with a bunch of filigree on them, and then they get into the throne room. And I like that it still has kind of the essence of the Wizard of Oz without being a direct replica. So his head is huge gold, and it's framed by like these fringe curtains instead of the standard drapes in other iterations of the Wizard of Oz. So when I saw the drapes, I was like, okay, how can I create a piece inspired by Wicked that's more original? Because I knew immediately that the majority of people who were going to enter were going to do something inspired by Galinda or Elphaba or both of them. I was tempted to do something inspired by both of them, but I just thought there was no way that I was going to be able to stand out. So I tried to draw inspiration from something a little more niche. So I had just seen the Eras Tour in, I think it was 2023 is when I saw it. But I remember Taylor Swift had this dress during the Fearless portion that was all fringe at the bottom, and it had great movement and just kind of like a theatricality when she would spin around. Zendaya wore something on a red carpet, I think it was like magenta, but it looked like armor. And so I was thinking, okay, well, I can combine the armor elements of that, make it look like the wizard's face, and then do the fringe skirt like Taylor Swift. So without further ado, this is how I made my costume for the Her Universe Fashion Show 2025. There is 4 pieces that I made for this costume altogether. I made an undershirt and leggings, both out of the same kind of green lycra. I made the corset out of Warbler, and then I made this skirt out of upholstery velvet, and the waistband is made out of like a faux satin material with interfacing on the inside to really give it structure.
The first pieces I made were the leggings and the undershirt because I knew they would be the easiest. So I picked up some green lycra from a local fabric store in Dallas. I used this activewear pattern from Simplicity as my base. I also sized up a bit because the fabric I chose was not as stretchy of a knit as the pattern called for. The first thing I did was sew in this triangle gusset, and I used mostly only zigzag stitches to maintain the stretch. After that, I matched up the dart on the other side and sewed all the way down the front seam of the pants. And then I brought the front and the back together and sewed along the inseam. I wanted the waistband to be thicker, so I actually doubled the pattern, and then I started by sewing both of these sides together. And for the waistband, I actually cut against the grain of the fabric to have more stretch horizontally. I sewed the waistband in half and attached it to the top. I hemmed the bottom of the legs and finished the seams even though I didn't need to because this fabric doesn't really fray. For the top, I used this specific one from McCall's, and I extended the bottom so it wasn't so much of a crop. So after I added that lower section to the bottom pieces, I cut everything out, and I also just wanted to keep this clip in so you could see my cat. This pattern called for a lining, but I did not want to complicate things, so I just made the main fabric and the lining both out of the green lycra. First, I sewed the cup together at the rounded edge here, and I think I actually stitched this twice for more stability. Then I clipped the edges to release some tension. After I sewed the front 4 pieces together, I attached the back panel. I forgot to mention this before, but this pattern was actually intended for stable fabrics like cotton, so because of this, there was a zipper included in the back. To get rid of that, I cut the back pieces on the fold and removed the allotted seam allowance to just get one big piece. I also sized my pattern down, and since my lining and main fabric are the same, I just repeated the exact same steps to get 2 copies. Now we're gonna do a little time skip here because I did not have this fabric until later. But to tie the skirt into that top, I just took some spare fabric I had from the fringe skirt and made 3 different straps. I went ahead and just used the pattern piece that came with the top and then altered the straps after I had already put them on to make sure they sat exactly where I wanted them to. After that, I attached the lining to the main fabric good side to good side by sewing along the top. Then I flipped it inside out and top stitched the hem to complete the undershirt.
So for the top, I decided to go with Warbla, which is a thermoplastic, which means that it's a plastic that can be molded and shifted using heat. The bodice by far took me the longest, and it still is not as perfectly smooth as I would have liked it to be, but I still am really happy with how it turned out.
Since I had never worked with Warbler before, I decided to follow a course by a costume designer and creator named Jalea. For the base, she recommended heating Warbler over a mannequin that was roughly your size, but unfortunately mine did not turn out as smoothly as hers always do. It tore, it had bubbles and buckles and all sorts of ridges, so I decided I had the extra Warbler and I needed the stability, so I was going to do an entirely new layer of patching and essentially smoothing out the Warbler any way I could. This took several hours over the course of 2 or 3 days, and I burned myself on the leg really badly, but I essentially just cut pieces of the Warbler that I had, formed them where I wanted, and then used heat and water in my fingers and sculpting tools to try to get it as smooth as I possibly could. When I at least got it to roughly the same thickness all the way around, I sanded it down and then filled in all of those nasty ridges with wood filler. Once the wood filler had dried, I sanded it again, and then I started making the filigree and adornments. I referenced both my initial sketch and the completed illustration for the show made for me by Mandy McClean Couch, and I started off by making the lining on the bottom and the top. So to get those nice perfect edges, I just measured out an inch of the foam and then I took some duct tape. Do not use duct tape, use masking tape. I realized that the hard way. But anyway, I used tape to essentially draft patterns right on the corset of every other shape I needed. After that, I used the tape pattern and put it right on the craft foam and cut out the pieces that I needed. I use this technique for pretty much every big piece of the face, the big swirls, the nose, the lips, everything. I layered Warbler over each foam piece I was using, then made sure it was as flush to the foam as it could possibly be. Then I turned in the edges like little hems, and I even covered the backside too. And then I used a combination of heat and E6000 glue to secure those pieces to the corset. Had I not used the wood filler, heat alone probably would have been fine, but I needed the extra stability that the glue had. It probably would have been better to use contact cement in this case, but I did not have contact cement at the time, so I was working with what I had. And you can see at the top edge right there the printed out illustration that I used as my reference. Once I had finished applying all of the accoutrement, if you will, I used a wood burner to burn holes in the back where I wanted my grommets to go. I also used a little sculpting dowel to make sure that these holes were big enough. To prime my corset for painting, I used Flex Bond, which you can also buy on the Warbler website. And you could still see a few streaks, but alas, that did not matter to me at this point. I just had to put my perfectionism aside because this piece had already been such a headache. I layered black spray paint on first to give dimension, and then I sprayed the entire corset front and back with I think 2 or 3 layers of the Krylon metallic gold spray paint. Then to add a little bit of dimension, I used this metallic bronze color from Folk Art and kind of brushed it lightly around the embellishments. Then to polish everything off, I hit it with this metal leaf spray sealant twice. In Jalea's course, she lined her corset with felt, so I decided to do the same. I thought it would make the entire corset just a little more polished. I made a pattern using duct tape, and then I cut out each piece, sprayed the back with Gorilla Glue, and then painted contact cement, which I ended up having to go buy, on the inside of the corset, and then pressed the felt glue side down to the contact cement. For finishing touches, I used black ribbon to kind of seal in all those seams. Then I put in gold grommets and laced up the back with gold cording that I bought on Amazon.
For these tassels here, this was originally white. I believe the fabric is called like upholstery flocked velvet. And I got this from Fabric Wholesale Direct, which is a website. I love them. Since I was looking for something so specific, I just decided it would be easier if I just dyed it myself. So I got it in pure white and I dyed it all on my dad's Blackstone, because you have to keep polyester fabric at a boiling temperature or else the fibers will not open up enough to take dye.
Shout out to my dad, who is making an appearance here because he wanted to make sure everything was going smoothly before he left me to my own devices. I decided I wanted 4 different shades of green, and I used a base of the Rit Dymore Peacock Green for all of them. If I wanted the color to be more emerald, I added tropical teal. If I wanted it to be more olive or chartreuse, I added daffodil yellow. And if I wanted it to be more of a dark green, I added graphite. I played around with the ratio of colors until I got formulas that I liked. Then I left each piece of fabric to marinate for about 30 minutes. The colors I ended up with are this light lime, a really dark forest green, chartreuse, and then a darker emerald color. I didn't mention this yet, but each fabric that I dyed was about 1 yard each. Then I measured out 3-inch segments on this fabric and then cut it into long strips. But before we go any further, I had to make a waistband. I bought this super thick interfacing and attached it to one side of this emerald satin, and I did 1 front piece and 2 back pieces with an opening for a zipper. The way I made this pattern was very convoluted and I didn't even film it, so I don't have much to say here, but I just sewed the front to the back pieces on both the standard satin and the interfacing. Then I folded in the edges and sewed the interfacing piece to the satin piece at the top and bottom. Now for a word from pre-voiceover, mid-project, Meredith. I made the belt using a pattern that is not easy to explain at all. I essentially just measured how much I wanted there to be for me to put fringe, because I think I want to add either 2 or 3 rows, we'll see. I probably should not have made this interfacing so stiff, but I wanted it to be sturdy enough to hold all the fabric that it is about to support. So now that we have it all ironed out, nice, ready to go, we are going to take our separating zipper here. This is 6 inches. I originally had one that was 7, but it didn't fit. We are going to take this, unzip it all the way, and then we are going to line up how we want the zipper to be in this little pocket that I made, because I already ironed in these sides right here. So we are just going to slide in the zipper until it's nice and snug. Then we are going to pin it in place and sew it in place, and that should finish off the zipper. And then I think before we continue to add the fringe, I am going to stitch along the top and the bottom just for security's sake. Alright, so like I said, we are going to be sewing in the zipper, and this clearly requires some deep concentration. My forehead has definitely smacked the machine from how close I get. But after that, we are going to, again, like I said, top stitch the top and the bottom edge. And now we are going to sew all of these strips right down the side. I tried to do this without pinning, which was a grave mistake because they all kept twisting, so eventually I just had to iron them all flat.
We were encouraged to add little details to our outfit just to make it more interesting. So I added little characters. I have Glinda, Alphaba, Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion all on these tassels.
For the little character embellishments, I just got some rhinestones and beads from Amazon and ones that I already had. I sketched out the most basic shapes of the characters, then glued them on and then sewed them in place. Now that I had the strips made and the waistband ready to go, it was time to assemble. I didn't have much rhyme or reason besides wanting darker colors to be mostly on the bottom, so I alternated between the deep forest green and the more emerald green color. I put the chartreuse tassels with the main Wizard of Oz characters near the front. and I think I left about a 5-inch gap to make the high-low effect more obvious. After that, it was time for the second layer. I did not do 3 layers, 2 was enough. I put the alphabet and Galinda tassels near the center front, and then I alternated between the light green and the chartreuse. And I don't think I have any footage of me making this kind of red satiny sash piece, but I just wanted to add it to kind of break up the green and really emphasize the curtain look. So I positioned that in the front where it would be very visible. Sewing through these strips was taking a toll on my machine, and I had to sew over them I don't even know how many times. I did a straight stitch first, then I went over the top with a zigzag as best as I could. You can see me sewing along the inside, the outside, anything I had to do to get these as secure as possible. It's truly a miracle that I did not break the needle. For finishing touches, I hand sewed any edges that were not caught by the zigzag stitch. Then I added a hook and eye to the top of the zipper. Then I positioned 2 straps in line with the other rows over the zipper with snaps so it would conceal that empty space when I was walking.
So the hat was made out of spare fabric from a lady named Terry Aldersey. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But she has a little boutique on Etsy called the Ooh La La Boudoir. And I actually first commissioned her to make this hat right when I found out that I was going to be in the show, because I wanted there to be plenty of time for it to be ready. I knew it was going to take some time, especially if this was a bespoke piece. So I sent over some of the fabric that I used on this curtain piece here, and then also in like the lycra underneath. And that is what this hat up here is primarily made out of. So the schedule for the week was on Wednesday. We would go in at like 4 p.m. and there was a short rehearsal. We would find out what song we were walking to and get kind of a general sense of everything. Thursday, we were going to be there all day, and that was the day of the fashion show. So I flew in with my mom and dad to San Diego on Tuesday. So I had a little extra time of like dilly-dallying and getting to see everything. I didn't film a lot of content once I got there. I was going to do more like talking heads of like before the competition, after the competition, but I just decided I was so overstimulated with everything already that I just decided I would just talk about it after. So I don't really have much to say because I feel like I've already talked a lot in this video. But I will say, for my first year participating in the show, it was amazing. I loved all of the designers that I got to meet. They were all so friendly. It was really cool being backstage and getting to see all of the little different intricacies that they included in their outfit that you couldn't see from stage, that you could only really see when you got up close. I don't think my walk was bad. I actually think it was good. But looking back, I like viscerally cringe watching myself, which I cringe at myself all the time, and then I just decide I don't care because I feel like a lot of things that I do can be considered corny or cheesy or stupid, cringe. Anyway, but I struggle to watch myself walk, but I know that it looks fine. It's also kind of easier to manage because I had on that really dark wig. So as long as I don't look at my face, I'm like, I don't know who that is. I definitely plan on entering the competition more in the future just because I loved getting to kind of flex my creative muscles, because this was a big project. I dedicated several hours to this. I can't even like put a number on it. And it was cool because I got to try a lot of different techniques, dyed fabric, worked with Warbla. But hopefully if you've seen this look and you liked it and you were curious about how I made it, hopefully this answers some of your questions. Again, so happy that I got to be in the show. Grateful for the people at Her Universe who selected me. I don't know when or where I will ever wear this again. I wish I could have it on a mannequin, but as you can see, this kind of gap right here does not look so good on the mannequin. So right now she's just sitting in a closet, but I love her very much. Definitely a child of mine at this point. But yeah, I hope this was informative. Thank you for watching. You can follow me on TikTok, you can follow me on Instagram, you can go look at my website to see other stuff that I've done. But I hope you enjoy. If you want to see more of what I've been kind of working on or what I will work on in the future, you can subscribe. But thank you so much for spending time with me, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.